morning, everyone. Thank you, Chairman Self and Ranking Member Keating for holding today's hearing, and thank you for joining us today. I want to ask my first question to Mr. Montgomery. NATO's ability to deter threats from Russia depends on a robust and responsive defense industrial base. However, Europe's defense industries face critical vulnerabilities in supply chains, production capacity, and procurement strategies, as highlighted by Russia's war against Ukraine. And with some NATO allies still falling short of the 2% GDP defense spending pledge, that also limits investments in modernization and readiness. So can you talk about the specific steps that NATO allies can take to address any vulnerabilities in Europe's defense industrial base, especially when it comes to critical munitions and advanced systems production?
Yeah, thank you for bringing that up, and you're absolutely right. As we look, as we sourced Ukraine over the last 3 years, 95% of the what U.S. provided was U.S. equipment, but more than 50% of what of the Western equipment provided by the Europeans was U.S. equipment. They do not have an effective defense industrial base. I also don't believe they can properly conceive of what is needed. It took you, Congress, 40 years to build the current defense industrial base and trillions of dollars in direct investment. And the Europeans have not made those commitments. And when I hear President Macron talk about a European solution to this, the amount of money he discusses is way too low. So the truth is the Europeans are going to need to rely on us over the next decade to rearm themselves, and they're also going to need to build their own defense industrial base.
Do you have some specific ideas as to how United States can help European allies in overcoming those shortfalls? And at the same time, we need to ensure the interoperability within our alliance.
I think we should take the example we have right now with Rheinmetall, a German artillery firm, which is partnered with U.S. firms so that they can scale their production properly. So what I think is joint ventures between U.S. companies and European companies that build both in the United States for jobs in the United States, but also in Europe for jobs in Europe with that European money. That is the most logical, cost-efficient way. It's not what the French are proposing, but I think long-term, that's how NATO needs to settle out.
Next, I want to talk about Russia and China. In your testimony, Mr. Montgomery, you made it very clear that Russia under Putin is the, in quote, single greatest threat to peace and democracy in Europe. You also noted the role that China has played in helping sustain Russia's war in Ukraine and providing dual-use technologies and economic support. So we know China is bolstering Russia's defense industrial base with microelectronics, telecommunications equipment, and drone technology. So in that context, how should NATO adapt its deterrence and defense strategies so they can address the combined military and technological threats posed by Russia-China partnership?
No, you're exactly right. And what I'm saying there is that Ukraine is actually fighting 4 countries right now: Russia, China, North Korea, and Iran. And I would say most of us think North Korea and Iran are the next biggest problems. They're not. It's China. China is backstopping Russia's economy. They've increased their imports and exports more than 30%. As you said, they provided the microelectronics that are going to KH-1, into cruise missiles and ballistic missiles. They're striking Ukraine every night. We absolutely have to hold China accountable for its support to Ukraine.
Is there specific capabilities or partnerships that NATO should prioritize to counter those threats?
Yeah, so I do believe NATO's role in an Asia-Pacific context will be very European in nature, very economic in nature, I'm sorry. So that what we need to do is start working together on how we sanction and export control China properly. And we need to get the Europeans more engaged in that and committed as we are.
And one more question regarding the NATO and Western Balkans. The Western Balkans is a critical region for NATO's efforts to promote stability and counter external influence. Russia has intensified its efforts to undermine NATO and EU integration in countries like Serbia, using disinformation, economic leverage, and political interference. So what specific strategies should NATO employ to counter Russia influence in the Western Baltics or Balkans, and particularly in Serbia, as I mentioned, and where the favorable perceptions of Russia are growing, especially, like I said, in Serbia?
I think you're exactly right. President Putin has supported both Vucic in Serbia and Dudic in Republic Srpski. We need to fully support Kosovo in its efforts to enter the European Union and NATO. But more importantly, we need to ensure that the stabilizing force, NATO's K4 force in Kosovo, is properly manned and equipped to do its job, to provide the warning that's necessary so that Washington can hold Serbia accountable for threats to Kosovo.
Thank you very much. My time's up. I yield back.